Fairly long question that just came in. The Liberal government has exposed many holes within our parliamentary democracy by corruption and unaccountability. With Conservative support, constitutional referendum for A, removing the Senate, and B, replacing with an equal, equitable representation Senate, and also remove the Indian Act.
Well, thank you for those two questions. Look, I think that clearly we need, the Indian Act needs to be replaced, but it can't be done unilaterally through an act of the Parliament of Canada. It has to be done in consultation with Indigenous peoples across Canada. As you know, there are over 600 bands in Canada, each with their own treaty rights, each with their own ways of doing things, and we can't have a one-size-fits-all approach to these 600 plus communities across the country. What we have to do is the difficult work of consulting with these communities in order to modernize the Act. And so that's the one thing I know about the Indian Act. We're long past the time of Parliament unilaterally enacting legislation without the consent of the peoples who will be subject to it. On the issue of the Senate, in principle, I believe in a reformed Senate. I think the Senate in its current form has been doing less than a good job in being a chamber of sober second thought. In some ways, the changes to the Senate have made some senators believe that they are a competitor to the House of Commons. And that's not true. The Supreme Court has clearly stated in its ruling when they overturned the Harper government's decision to elect senators that the Senate is not a competitor to the House of Commons. It's a complementary body. But I think some senators have got it into their head that they can overrule the House of Commons, and I think that's unacceptable because in a Westminster-style parliamentary democracy, only the people's elected representative can approve spending, can approve taxation, and the Senate cannot. But I think we've seen recently with some tax bills where the senators have decided that they can defer or amend or defeat tax bills, and I don't believe they should have that power. In fact, the UK Parliament had a crisis on this very issue 100 years ago when the government, I believe it was the government of David Lloyd George, introduced a budget which the Lords defeated. Because up to that point in time, the aristocratic Lords thought they had the right to defeat spending and taxation bills from the House of Commons. It created a constitutional crisis that led to reforms in the House of Lords. So today, the House of Lords does not have the right to overrule the elected House of Commons and overrule the people's elected representatives in respect of taxation and spending bills. And I think those are the kinds of reforms we need for the Senate to make it clear that when it comes to issues of taxation, issues of finance, issues of spending, that the fundamental constitutional principle, which is in our Constitution, as read by the Supreme Court, that there shall be no taxation without representation in this country, and there can be no spending without representation as well. So those are the kinds of reforms I support. The devil is always in the details on this kind of stuff. The Harper government tried to implement it without having to bring 10 provinces together for a constitutional reform. And so if we could figure out a way to introduce some reforms without having to reopen the Constitution, I think that would be ideal, because as the last 30, 40 years have proved, constitutional negotiations and change is very difficult.
Second last.
Okay, I'm here with Derek Noonan, and we just came back from a meeting with Michael Chong, and Derek asked the question about the Indian Act and the Senate reform, and so here, which will be attached to this video, and so we'll just get Derek's response to Michael Chong's answer. So go ahead, Derek.
Yes,
so
sir.
go ahead with the Indian Act first.
We'll do the Indian Act too. First, freedom, everyone.
Yes,
He
freedom.
was in agreement with me. I meant the Indian Act The Indian Act actually, you can argue that the Indian Act has been in existence actually since the beginning of Confederation. So over the decades, it's been changed, it's been reworked, specifics, but the way it's stated now, it's completely antiquated, and he agreed. I mean, it should be removed, and then really after it's removed is the negotiations with, which would take time, which would be with every nation or band, if you want to call them, which are about 630 different bands in Canada.
And that's what's probably made it kind of almost impossible at this stage of the game, because all those 600 bands likely are not in agreement.
No.
And that's why the Indian Act has just stayed there, I think.
It is. It's just stayed there. But the other thing, too, is again, I don't like always speaking for our Indigenous brothers and sisters. Mm-hmm. But the government utilizes it when they feel like they want to utilize it. That's the other thing. And if you notice too, other treaty, they've gone and made individual treaties already, even with the Indian Act in place. So that just shows you why that act has to be removed. The biggest thing too, in terms of the whole country itself, is it will nullify or pretty much make UNDRIP
null and void.
Null and void in a sense.
Yeah.
It'll still exist, but if we do it in good terms, if we respect our Indigenous brothers as caretakers of the land, and we're all in good favor of each other, and we do it honestly and sincerely, that's the route that we should go, and keep in mind the law of one of all our own individual rights to self-determination, which is our God-given or Creator's right. So that was positive. The second topic is basically what the second part of the question is I asked, in tune with that, to do the Indian Act, and what I ask is really we need a constitutional referendum in this country. And what I mean by that is everything that's happened presently with Justin Trudeau, what we see in Parliament with them being supported by the NDP, what we see with Justin having the ability to cancel inquiries on himself and on his party, theft, Justin being able to arbitrarily write a check to Ukraine without it going through any review, any vote, just signs away our taxpayers' money. These are just, there's hundreds more, but these are just kind of top ones that we need really to change how we're governed. And initially what would help, and will also, with our brothers and sisters in Western Canada, feel like they have some control over their own destiny within this government, is to have an electable Senate. And whether it's 2 seats or 3 seats per province, but it's equally, it's all provinces have equal Senate seats. And as well, what will happen too is we should include seats that would be filled by our Indigenous brothers and sisters per province. What that means, and what an electable Senate should have, is it should have veto power over any laws or bills that either the Prime Minister or what goes through the Parliament either agreed with by voting for it or voting against it. Them having that veto power ensures that the situation that we're in with right now with Justin and Jagmeet, Justin basically can make anything up that he wants. Jagmeet's going to agree to it, it becomes a bill, and it proceeds. The Senate, the way it is now, is appointed. And there's senators on there, believe it or not, there's senators on there that have been on there for 30 years. And what happens is as seats come up, it's a lifetime appointment, or they choose to retire early if they don't want to participate anymore. And who's ever Prime Minister gets to fill that Senate seat. So Justin, just recently, there was 3 in that case. There was 1 senator that passed away, and 2 senators that have decided, enough's enough. They've been in there for One was in there for 21 years, one was in there for 17. They said, that's fine, we're finished. Justin appoints 3. Now, he says that they're non-partisan, but all 3 of them are clearly Liberal partisans. Now, what happens presently with the way our Senate is the Senate can disagree with a bill. They can't, however, kill the bill. What they do is they can offer amendments and take it back to Parliament. Parliament will vote again if they want to choose the amendments. The Prime Minister could even say, listen, I don't accept your amendments, I'm putting the bill through again, and just play along with the Senate. Now, basically we're a parliamentary democracy, which is basically the British parliamentary system. We aren't a republic. We aren't a republican democracy. So our Senate really acts more as a complement to the Parliament, which means they perceive that the Parliament is putting forth bills that are representative of the population. And it's their duty not really to destroy or kill the bill, but to offer really a critique in what would be amendments. Now, Stephen Harper did try to change it. He didn't try to change, he really wanted them to be elected, but he didn't want to change how that process is constitutional. So he didn't want them really to be able to either create a bill themselves and or have that option of vetoing a bill. I kind of keeping it very main, low-key in the description. Now, what I didn't like from his answers today is he kind of proves that he's very like a swamp creature. He likes the status quo in a sense, other than to say that on some financial bills and taxation bills that there is room for the Senate to be able to decline the bill. So that, to me, that was a really, I don't like that answer at all. That's very swampy. That's very status quo, which means, you know, he was also in a party that was in power with Harper and before, so he's been in power, and he sees how you can enjoy the Senate in that aspect, very much like the Liberals. That benefits those guys in Parliament, but that doesn't benefit us as a country. Now, having said that, I don't lose hope on all Conservatives, because we've spoken to maybe, now I'm up to about 4 Conservative MPs out west, and they're in complete agreement with me. I mean, the Senate, destroy the Senate the way it is, destroy the Privy Council the way it is, just wipe out the Privy Council, it doesn't even exist at that point. The Senate is electable, equal seat distribution per province. The Senate has the power to either create a bill that goes before Parliament, and you have 3 levels of sign-off before a bill goes to Royal Assent, which will mean the Prime Minister, Parliament, Senate. Senate can kill it, PM can kill it. That's kind of moving it towards a republic. But to be all honest, really, the next stage for me after that, and really, as a country, this is something we should really start to consider, is how loyal are we to the monarchy now? And if we do want to go the route of removing the Indian Act and being honest with our Indigenous partners and create a very honest agreement as brothers and sisters of the land, and come to terms with treaties, in all honesty, we really don't need the monarchy. And at that point, you know, ideally, I would like us to remove ourselves as under the monarch, which basically means exit the Commonwealth and create a republic, which means we'll have a much more equal voice. Now, these MPs are smart. They kind of hide all of this with election reform. You hear about the election reform, and it's nonsensical because it still means the same thing. They aren't addressing the issue of the amount of seats they are in Ontario compared to Western Canada. Their big thing is, well, do you know what we'll do? Is when you vote, you can vote for a candidate in number order, which means this would be my number 1 pick, this would be my number 2 pick, and this would be my number 3 pick. And then they create basically who received the most number 1s, who received the most number 2s, and hierarchy through there. Won't mean anything in terms of what, it won't change anything. People may feel that they've got a little bit more representative, but this is where we're at.
I think that probably many of us would entertain the idea of constitutional reform in Canada in whatever form that takes, because we do need some safeguards, and whether that's Senate, what you're suggesting with the Senate reform, whether that's getting out of the monarchy, etc. But we do need to start the conversation, I would say, about constitutional changes to have safeguards for all of us, besides the Bill of Rights and the Charter, because they've made that very clear that they were willing and able to dismiss those rights.
Right.
So we do need to create something, and I think this is a really good start in the conversation as far as speaking to these members of Parliament, and the fact, as I was saying to you earlier, the fact that they're actually speaking to us, I think it's a huge step forward, certainly compared to before and after and during the convoy. They wouldn't talk to us for anybody. Now we've just talked to 2 members of Parliament, one being a minister, in one day.
Yeah.
And then on Friday we'll talk to Larry Brock, and maybe you want to put that question to him as well about
100%.
Constitutional reform and see what his answer is. So the more we get on if we can get that on videotape, then the better. So we do have this Michael's answer, and we'll see what steps forward we can take. So it's getting a little long in the answer, but this is, I think, a really good start. So I will kind of end this. We're on the road, so we're driving back from Kitchener. And then Friday we'll be heading to Guelph, and we'll be having a conversation with Larry Brock, and probably got a few questions to him about inquiries, and then probably this constitutional question, I think, is something that needs to be brought up and discussed. So I'm going to get me and you. Freedom, everybody. Yeah. Thanks for joining us, and stay tuned.
Till Friday.
Stay tuned. Okay. Bye, everybody. Cheers. Freedom.